Welcome back, everybody, to the Breakout CEO podcast. I'm your host, of course, Jeff Holman. Really glad to be here with you today. You'll notice I don't have a guest with me. Today is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a shorter episode because I want to introduce something new that we're doing. Every month, we're going to have our Advisory Insights episodes. It's just a week with 3 or 4 advisors, people who work with scaling CEOs and founders, and what types of perspectives and insights that they share with their clients, those CEOs who are building businesses and the founders who are building teams. They share their insights and their perspectives with us on a topic. And so the topic this month is finding and fixing executive leadership misalignment in scaling businesses. So if you've ever felt like your leadership team is rowing really hard, but the boat just keeps going in circles or backwards or some other way other than forwards, or maybe doesn't move at all, then I think this month's Advisory Insights series is going to be fun for you. Here's something that I've noticed, okay, both in my business, my career, and in other businesses that I've worked with as an attorney. And that is most scaling companies don't stall because the market dries up, right? They stall because the team loses misalignment. And this isn't necessarily something that happens in dramatic fashion. It's not necessarily a big blow up, although that could contribute, but they stall because people oftentimes just quietly get misaligned because they're focused on different objectives, different metrics, KPIs, whatever you want to call it. They're focused on something different and they forget to come back to the bigger picture. And sometimes this goes on quietly for a long time before anybody can ever even put their finger on it. So this type of misalignment shows up in ways that might feel unrelated at first, right? You find that you're spending 60 or 70% of your time on people problems, for example, or you're doing things that should be simple, but they're taking forever. You're just not getting to completion. Maybe your team is really busy, like I mentioned before, but your progress feels really slow. Or sometimes you just sense that something's off, right? But you can't quite put your finger on it. You can't quite name what that is. Well, these are the types of things that often are signals of misalignment from the inside. It's not necessarily a blow up, like I said, just some type of friction that's happening in the business that you feel like it shouldn't be there. We're going to talk about this theme with our advisors, and I want to introduce each one of them to you. Now, I've got a story that I was going to share about me going to a law firm and going to help start I was going to bring my IP expertise and help start an IP practice for that office. And at the same time, we were going to also start more of a startup advisory division within their firm. Long story short, I went there. I brought my IP expertise. I had a lot of good meetings. At least I thought they were good meetings. They were meetings. I had a lot of meetings with partners and marketing and things like that about starting up this startup division, because I wanted to actually take my career from being what was really a strict patent practice for 15 years into more of a general counsel role like I am today. Well, we had a lot of meetings, but we just didn't have a lot of action. And I realized that we were just simply misaligned. Something in that business, and there were a lot of things in that business, but something in that business was just structurally not accommodating for what they had agreed that they wanted to have in the business. So we couldn't accomplish it. Long story short, I moved on, and I'm doing now today what I had intended to do in that law firm a long time ago. I sometimes wonder if they realize what I'm doing now is what we could have been doing there in their firm, if they have any regrets about that not working. But so be it. That's where things came out, and I'm extremely happy with what the practice looks like today that I'm doing. I also had another story, and I don't want to go into too many details. Of course, I won't disclose anything confidential, but I had a client who entered into a business transaction with a strategic partner, and they talked, and both parties said, yeah, this will be great. You bring product, we bring the distribution expertise, and it's going to be a match made in heaven. Well, come to find out, after, a lot of things went wrong, we were dealing with somebody on the other side who was in a legal function on their team. And he, for whatever reason, he had this idea that you always want to kind of create these ambiguities and leave yourself an out so you don't actually have to perform the things that you committed to perform. which, baffles me because without performing those things, there was no reason to have the relationship exist in the first place. Long story short, he sabotaged the deal. Now, I didn't know this. I had some suspicions. I'd warned my client up front, hey, these ambiguities in these deal documents do not make sense. Like, we need to nail them down. You already nailed them down in the conversation. It doesn't compute why they're not clearly stated the same way in the documents. I mean, that's actually a red flag. Well, the client signed the documents anyways. And, long story short, they ended up having to separate, or I think they might maybe still trying to separate. Who knows? It's been a long process for all of them and for the banks involved. And instead of actually having a productive relationship, I think the idea was just, how do we get out of this with the least damage to everybody? So big problems. In fact, I talked to somebody afterwards about that. Somebody who was inside on the other party, right? He wasn't part of the deal discussions directly with me ever, but we met later and unrelated to this, and the topic just came up. He's like, "Oh, hey, you worked on that deal, right?" He said, "Yeah, we always thought it was weird that our attorney wanted to do this type of approach with not just your deal, but every deal we did." Okay. So this was intentional. He was literally, I think he thought he was being, I don't know, a savvy attorney or something. But what he did was just undermine that whole thing. Now, that's not a story of partners coming together or, an executive leadership team. Well, I don't know. I don't know if he was on their executive leadership team or not in that capacity. But clearly there was misalignment between the parties. Right? The same way that there could be misalignment between founders, between your CEO and COO or CMO, between you and your investors. Like, that misalignment can show up in a lot of different places and in a lot of different ways. The advisors that we're talking to in the next couple episodes are going to help us navigate some of these things, right? And I've got 3 of them. I've got Derek, I've got Robert, and I've got Ral. They've all come to help share some insights and perspectives that I think you're going to find valuable. So let me tell you about each of them and just give you a preview of those episodes that'll be coming out in the next days. One episode per day. I think you're going to enjoy it. So Derek Fredrickson has spent 15 years as a COO and a second in command for scaling businesses. And now he leads a fractional COO firm that works with founders in the multi 7 to 8 figure level, right? So serious businesses, maybe the size of business that you are right now. His whole model is built around one idea, and that is getting people in the right roles, which oftentimes means removing the founder from the day-to-day so that the business can actually grow, right? He's joining us from Paris, which I found was fun. I was there last year. I love Paris. And he and his wife had actually relocated there for quality of life issues, which I think maybe parallels what a lot of founders and CEOs are trying to achieve eventually. Now, they're going to probably work really hard to get there, but in one form or another, a lot of our audience is working for ultimately quality of life. So Derek's episode is for anyone who's ever thought to themselves, I have a million ideas and nobody even wants to finish them. Like, I can't get people to actually work on them. That's a common problem for a very visionary CEO. Well, he breaks down why founders and operators are literally wired differently and why that gap, when it's not bridged intentionally, is one of the most common sources of misalignment in a scaling company. He's got a framework that I actually love, right? He said, make it up, make it real, make it recur. So to put that into perspective here, the CEO is usually the one making it up. The COO or someone in that operational role is usually the one making it real. And then hopefully if you've designed the system correctly overall, then the team can make it recur. Pretty simple concept, but it changes how you think about perhaps every hire and every handoff in your business. Our second guest is Robert White. He has a pretty interesting business journey that he shared with us. He built a human potential training company. It was one of the largest companies of its kind in Asia with 240 employees, 15 training centers across 7 different countries. And apparently they trained over 700,000 leadership graduates. Pretty amazing. Then, like some founders do, he lost it all. And of course, like founders do, he went back to rebuild. And so he spent the last 20 years now working with small and mid-sized growth companies on leadership issues. And he brings both the wins and, of course, the failures to that work. Well, Robert's episode gets at the root of misalignment, and he starts by asking a question that most leaders will skip, right? What exactly are we aligning to? Well, his framework is about getting your team to genuinely own the purpose, own the vision, the values of the organization, right? And he's direct about something that sometimes we avoid. And from his perspective, he says alignment has to be enforced. It's not just something that we encourage. We've got to enforce it with our team. So his episode will make you ask yourself whether your team is truly aligned or maybe just politely compliant with each other. Our third guest is Ral West. Now, she also has a very interesting backstory as a founder and CEO for 45 years before turning to coaching other scaling CEOs. Ral was a 45-year serial entrepreneur who, with her husband, built a travel business from nothing. And you think travel business, what is that? Well, they lived in Alaska. They would travel to Hawaii, kind of split their time. And they thought, well, other Alaskans will want to do this too. So they started packaging condo rentals together, right? And then they eventually chartered wide body jets, and they were running what would be called a scheduled charter airline, essentially buying out jet capacity, selling tickets, and running their own travel service between Alaska and Hawaii. So they eventually sold that to Alaska Airlines, and now she's coaching, like I mentioned, other entrepreneurs. Ral brings in some of the really hard-earned perspective because she's been down this path, and you don't get that unless you've scaled your own business. So Ral's episode is about culture as the foundation for alignment and what it really takes to get a team genuinely bought in, not just going through the motions, right? She talked about something that she called open book management. This is actually sharing the financials with your team and maybe even teaching your team how to read a profit and loss statement, right? Turning your team effectively into real partners in the business's success. So she also has a lot to say about leadership courage, specifically how long a lot of founders will wait before they'll address a problem head on and what that type of delay can really cost a business. And then she's got one fruit bowl analogy that I think you'll find interesting. So what I found across all three of these conversations with Derek and Robert and Ral is that misalignment rarely, like I mentioned before, announces itself with a huge, big, dramatic blow up or moment like that. It's usually something quieter that just begins slowly and then starts to fester. And it's when a founder who's, like I mentioned before, these types of signals, when a founder is working hard but really not making progress, or the team is executing, but they're not quite doing things in the same direction, or you hire somebody who looks great on paper, but they can never quite get, up to speed or fit in with the team, all just different signals of misalignment. And so I think Derek's going to give you the structural lens with roles and systems, kind of the COO/CEO dynamic, whereas Robert's going to give you the values lens, right? Are you really aligned to something? What exactly are you aligned to as a team? Not just what have you stated are your mission and core values, for example. And then Ral, she's going to bring in another cultural and operational lens. How do you build a team that's genuinely in the game with you, not just employed by you? So together, I think they'll give you a pretty complete picture of what we're talking about. Before I hand you off to the advisory insights episodes with these guests, I want to leave you with something perhaps a little bit more concrete, because I know that inaction is often the reason that we get into misalignment in the first place. And so I want to give you a few actions that you perhaps could think about taking even before or right after you listen to these episodes with our guests. So I'm going to give you a couple different options here. You can pick your poison if you want to, which of these sounds the best for you. But here they are. So one option, every leader I've talked to about misalignment can name a signal that they saw and ignored right before the misalignment actually came to light. We've talked about what those signals might be. Well, what I want you to do is go and just spend 30 minutes thinking about what types of signals for misalignment have you perhaps seen in your business already. Go write it down. Just put a name to it, but articulate what that is, and that can be your action. If you don't want to do that, if you don't want to sit down and name one of the signals in your business that might be leading to misalignment, then here's a second suggestion. Go get your leadership team in a room or on a call, go talk to them and ask them, Are we aligned on where we're going? And does everyone here actually own it? So don't just ask them if they know the mission statement or the core values. Ask them if they own alignment on the executive team. And you might be surprised at the range of answers that you get, right? The goal isn't with this to go fix everything. It's not like, don't debate them on whether or not alignment exists. Just ask them how much they own the executive team alignment themselves. So the goal is just to find out where the gaps are at this point, right? Now, those are two options. A third, it relates more to what Derek said. If you're sensing some structural misalignment, roles that aren't really clear, or accountability that doesn't ever quite pan out, then you spend 30 minutes this week, write down where you want the business to be in 12 months, right? So we're not necessarily talking about all the problems in the business. We're talking about what will it look like in 12 months if we have alignment. Now, this isn't a business plan. You're not writing, step by step how to get there. Just what would it look like if we're really working in alignment in 12 months from now? And then, of course, once you have that vision, the second half of this is to ask yourself, does my current team look like what I want to see in 12 months from now? And you can start to identify perhaps what's already working and where some of the gaps are with your existing team. So that's it. There's 3 options there. If you want to do one of those 3, or if maybe you have another favorite that you want to do, but spend a little bit of time and think about where the misalignment might sit in your business. And I think if you do that and then you listen to the episodes with Derek and Robert and Ral, it's going to be a really productive time for you. Now, that's all I have for the episode, for this little intro to our Advisory Insights series that's going to happen this week. 2 other things, though, just as a podcaster, if you're not already subscribed to the Breakout CEO podcast, now's a great time, right? These 3 Advisory Insights episodes are going to drop over the next 3 days, and each one's going to go a little bit deeper into the topic that we mentioned. I just don't want you to miss them, and love to have you be part of our community long term. So go